Okay, go Hugo.
Okay.
This is Hugo de Garis, everybody. He's speaking at a conference, and he's going to be speaking on the politics of AI and other technologies, probably nanotech and biotech and femtotech.
Well, but that's not the topic I'll talk about now. I didn't get any sleep last night, so I feel a bit drugged. My brain's in hibernation mode. I've just spent a week in Sydney brainstorming with a fellow mathematical physics professor. His name's Chris Hamer, and a decade ago he wrote a book called A Global Parliament, Principles of World Federation. And 4 years ago now, my second book was called Multis and Monos, that's multicultured and monocultured. Here's where the brain is like that. What the multicultured can teach the monoculture towards the creation of a global state. So the theme I'll be talking about this 10 minutes is Globa. That's the label I give to a global state. And the basic idea is that accelerating technologies, I believe, will make a global state, a world government, a totally democratic world within about 40 years. So probably by mid-century, given the accelerating rate, not just technology is changing, but the technology is driving the politics and world societies and so forth, making this idea plausible. So, well, I need to give a little bit of history. 2 months? 2 months ago, I was in New York filming for Discovery Channel, and if you don't know, keep an eye out. In November of this year there will be a 45-minute documentary on the Singularity, and if you know the characters in this saga, Kurzweil was sidelined. Right? I've been complaining for ages that he's too optimistic, he's too Pollyanna. He sees everything through rose-coloured glasses, not realistic. So that will come out, and I was told, in fact, I've got it with me, there's a book out, a science fiction novel, fairly recent, and it's doing quite well. It's only been out a month or two. It's called Robopocalypse. Now you can guess from the title what it's about, but the really significant thing about that is that Steven Spielberg, nonetheless, is directing the movie of that book, and the movie will be out in 2 years, 2013. So that's going to bring the issue to mainstream. So So I wouldn't be at all. My own estimate was probably about 5 years, just because there's just so much happening. Like Kurzweil got on cover of Time magazine, January I think it was this year. So you got the Discovery Channel coming out in November of this year. So it's pretty clear. This year is the year that it's going mainstream, at least in the media. Certainly in America, Australia also. If you haven't seen it, go to ABC TV's Hungry Beast. Just Google it, and it's only 5 minutes, but it's pretty succinct and it's straight to the point, and it's pretty good. So so keyword ABC TV, Hungry Beast, Singularity, right? And you can see it. Okay, so in New York, did all the filming. Let me see if I can remember the guys who are in it. So I was shocked when I learned that Kurzweil was not in it. And why was that? Well, you know the expression, the person who pays the piper calls the tune? Well, this television production company, they get contracted by Discovery Channel. Right? So they do what Discovery Channel wants. And Discovery Channel wanted doom and gloom. They didn't want sweetness and light. So they didn't want Kurzweil. So who did they want? So So who was in it? There were like eight.
Gertzel.
That's it?
Ben Gertzel?
Yeah. Well, anything I'm in, I always pull in Ben. So why is Ben here? Right. Okay. So Ben, me, Michio Kaku. The Japanese American guy. There was a Newsweek staff reporter. Who, by the way, got so engrossed in this whole thing. He's now writing a book about it, right? So that'll be out in about a year or so. Peter Singer, now not the Peter Singer, like our Peter Singer. I made that mistake, because I've been trying to twist Peter Singer's arm for a decade to write a book on what I call intellect ethics, the whole ethics. Now there's another Peter Singer. It's like Peter W. Singer. Well, I had to learn the hard way. And he's an expert on 21st century warfare and weaponry, right? So he was on. One of my days stayed, I can't remember the anyway, eight guys. No, they didn't take any of the Brits. Oh yeah, the president of the American Futurist Association. He was there. So that's just about all of them, I think. Anyway, now at the very end of the filming, my turn, because we all had slots for the filming. I just casually almost mentioned to one of the main guy who was scripting us. Yeah, sorry, lateral thinking. This program, this 45-minute doc that you'll see in November, it started off. The strategy was leading up to the Singularity, and then the main brain, the thinking woman, the philosopher behind what the general direction of the program would be like. She changed after a couple of weeks of thinking about it, and then the program became split into like two halves: pre-Singularity and post-Singularity. And because Discovery Channel wanted doom and gloom, I don't need to go into details what happened in the second half, right? We were virtually scripted, right? They'd virtually, almost word for word. And I was a bit jet lagged, and so they'd take like 3 takes, 4 takes, and it was almost scripted. Right? It wasn't a talking head expressing their opinions. There was a definite structure. They had their agenda, so. Expect that when it comes out. Anyway, so the filming finished, and the guy who was sort of in a sense scripting me, I asked him, "Hey, Greg, would you be at all interested in the possibility of doing another program, different doc, on the theme of the rise of a global state?" And he just froze and stared blank at me, and I'm sort of psyching myself for a no. And then he said, "Yeah." So next step was, so I wrote a book about this 4 years ago, and I was thinking, hey, I need some help. So first idea came to me was to contact this Chris Hamer, who's he's retired now, but University of New South Wales, a theoretical physicist, and he wrote this really, I thought was the best. So I asked him, please, Chris, write the foreword to my book. So he did. So for this past week, the two of us have been creating a kind of outline for a 2-hour doc. That's what the specs were from this production company. A 2 hour, so it'd be like an hour and a half plus half an hour of ads, usual American stuff, on the theme of the rise of a global state. So basically what we did, we just sort of merged our 2 books, and we took chapters and they become like sections, and then so we wrote out 10 major sections. So things like forces pushing towards the creation of a global state. What institutions would you need in a global state? What are the forces resisting a global state? Why do we not live in a global state today? What would the benefits be of a global state? How do we suffer by not having a global state? All these sort of things. And then we had that done in the first day or so, and then we did for each section, these major headings, 10 of them, like if you think of chapters, and then by the end of the second or third day we had subheadings, and the rest of the week we're just writing text. Like we just called it voice. So either you have a talking head, or animation, or film, well, the trade people they talk about visuals. You're doing television. You have to fill the screen always with something. Right? So visuals. So suggesting that. Now it's all very iffy. We kept getting emails, and they were becoming progressively more enthusiastic, which is nice, which is great. But it's a two-step iffy, two bridges to be crossed. Right? First thing is to get this production company enthusiastic, so that they want to do it, and then if they're sold, then they will go to Discovery Channel and try to sell them and get a contract to do it. Right? So this is literally the first talk I've ever given on this topic. Right? So I'm a bit sort of and dead tired. So. So, in essence, what's the argument? Well, I've written an essay on it. If you want to sort of fairly succinct, just five, 6 pages, on the Kurzweil AI site. So just go to kurzweilai.net, and then click on the essays tab. Go down a few, and the Americans hated it. I think it got more. What's the word? Feedback. Like that was 4 or 5 hits. This was like 30 something, and they hated it because why? I live in China, a bit out of touch. In Australia, Australian culture. I've been away 40 years. How strong is PC? Is there a pretty strong PC feeling in Australian culture? It's very strong in America. Right? You cannot criticize other cultures. So I got slammed. Anyway, so that essay was called Accelerating Technologies Will Create a Global State by 2050. I think that was the title. Anyway, so here's the argument, in essence. There are lots of factors pushing the world into a global state. I'll just give you a few of them. Probably the most important one is a phenomenon called BRAD, bit rate annual doubling. In other words, the internet's speeding up. It's doubling its speed not every 18 months, but every 12. Annual doubling. So now I'm a physicist, so I don't see any limit to how tiny some substrate can be that you put information on. We can probably go right down the stream for all I know, right? So I see this BRAD phenomenon just remaining valid for many decades. Okay? So what does that mean? If you go, say, 30 years and a doubling every year, what is 2 to the 30? It's 1 billion. Can you imagine an internet 1 billion times faster than today's? And if you go out 40 years, and a lot of us here will still be alive, an internet that's 1 trillion times faster than today's, what could you do with such a thing? Well, I don't know, but one obvious answer is you could give everybody everything, like all the world's media, okay? You could have utterly vivid 3-dimensional imagery, as real as I see you right now. And so, as a consequence of that, people's mentalities, their horizons, will shift from national to global. I just see that as inevitable. I live in China, and the government has monopoly control of your mind if you're Chinese. They are utterly brainwashed. Chinese government is wonderful, 10% economic growth rate. They are nationalistic to the hilt, and to some extent justified. Highest amount of kilometres in the high-speed track in the world, blah 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 blah, and they feel they will be the culture of the future. And whatnot. But anyway, utterly brainwashed. So when you get everything, like, do some of you have international satellite TV? You're thinking about a dozen of the major countries sending you news reports, BBC World, NHK World, that's Japan, France 24, France, Deutsche Welle, Germany, and so on. There's a world community growing more and more. So just see that moving to saturation. Space planes, 2013, first space plane will be up. Virgin Galactic will be up next year, soon. Right? It costs you $200,000, but yeah. So spaceplane technology is coming. So I know New York, Beijing, 2-3 hours. That kind of thing. But especially this Brad phenomenon, the internet. Okay, so with everyone sending down like internet satellites and that kind of thing, I'm expecting you get a kind of a linguistic snowball effect. Right? Imagine you're like a 6-year-old kid and you're zapping the world. And you notice, hey, 60% of all this stuff's in English. Oh, Daddy, please teach me English. I want to learn English so I can look at all this stuff. Okay? So zillions of kids do that. Now imagine you're a minister of technology, telecommunications, and you're making the decisions on what to send up to the satellite system for the whole planet. Now, of course, you'll send up your own country's language, right? Obvious. But so you've got enough budget to send up 2 or 3 other languages. Well, what other language will you choose? Well, of course, English will be one of them. It's already the world's business, scientific, air travel, world language already. And there are far more people who speak English as either first or second language by a mile. The most spoken first language is Mandarin. About 1 billion people. Amazing. Okay, so you can see where I'm going with this argument. You're going to get a kind of saturation effect, a snowball effect. So the Minister of Telecom will notice that about 60% of listeners, viewers, are doing that in English. So they'll send it up in English. And then you do the math and it sort of saturates until the whole, you get a world language. Once you've got a world language, ideas just go boom. Right? And if you've got that, then you start really getting cultural homogenization. When I was living in Europe, people in their 20s, 30s, well educated, all speak English. They would zip from city to city with the same distances and the same cheap airfares, like Sydney, Melbourne. You just said $50. $50, right? Sydney, Melbourne, $50. Well, these guys are going like Helsinki, London, Paris, Bonn, Berlin, at the same prices. And to them, it's just each country is just local colour. That's their mentality. So they see themselves as sort of Europeans, young Europeans, and they can converse easily with each other in English. So that's sort of the model. I just like to see what's coming. Okay, so Brad. World language, cultural homogenization, and then you've got many other phenomena, like the European Union is now 27 countries. Next year, maybe 28, and there's another 7, I think, in the pipeline waiting. And then you're talking, what's that, 35 countries. That's about 1/6 of the whole world anyway. You've got Sarkozy, President of France, talking about a Mediterranean Union, bring in all the North African Arab countries and Middle East into a Mediterranean Union. You've got Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, trying to push Washington. Hey, we should form an Atlantic Union. So bring in NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area, and the EU, bring them together to make an Atlantic Union, and to have the feeling of being pushed. Why? Well, 1.3 billion people, 10% economic growth rate. Just for fun. Okay? 3-4 days ago, I got out an envelope and I started doing some classical back-of-the-envelope type calculations. And I came to the conclusion that Melbourne and Sydney will have race riots, anti-Chinese, within 10 years. That seems a bit radical, but let me give you this slower, maybe later. But do the math, right? Just make some fairly reasonable assumptions, and you'll come to some surprising conclusions. The Chinese government is saying within 10 years there will be 100 million Chinese tourists internationally. Let's say a quarter of them decide to come to Australia. It's relatively close. It's high standard of living, there's lots to see. Europe's obviously very popular. Paris is still by far the most popular world tourist city in the world. It's a magic about Paris. Okay. And America. Let's say a quarter of them come to Australia. That's 25 million. Let's say they stay a week. So you divide 25 million by 50. And then divide that by 2 or 3. You getting a picture? The number of Chinese. 10 years from now, and you go down the high street, all the signs will be Chinese, or at least bilingual. Right? And every 4 or 5 people you see, like 3 or 4 of them will be Chinese. What impact's that going to have socially? Anyway, so the world will unify. It will be much easier than I'm hoping. Just the very ideology of globism, forming a global state, will be in the air, and then then we start dreaming in the positive sense. If you have a true global state, a fully democratic global state, like this axis is the percentage of countries still dictatorships. And this axis is just time in years. Today, in today's world, if you exclude the Chinese, that's a fifth of humanity. 90%, 90% of non-Chinese live today in democracies. That makes China the big, bad, backward exception. So, and the world is democratizing at roughly about 2 countries a year on average. You've got the Arab Spring going on right now. So hopefully, another sway of countries will democratize. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised China will be the very last one to democratize, because it's the only third world country to have anti-satellite weapons. So what? Well, the Europeans now are sending up satellites, internet satellites, and covering Europe. And the next step, they say, they'll cover Africa. Now, just a few years ago, the Chinese destroyed one of their own satellites. And there's a very clear message to the rest of the world: don't mix with China. Right? Don't you start sending propaganda, or they call propaganda, down to the Chinese. Right? We'll destroy your satellites. So they may end up being the very last, maybe. Anyway. So roughly 2 countries a year. And interestingly, if you look at that curve, I've got different numbers. We looked into this debate. Anyway, the stats I got, it's coming down almost in a straight line. Right? Roughly 2 countries a year. So you can extrapolate that trend, and in about 40 years, assuming the model is correct, of course, in about 40 years, the whole planet is democratic. So this process of getting rid of the dictatorships, I call it de-dictation. Getting rid of the dictatorships. And then, no more wars. Have a guess how much the planet spends on armaments per year? You may be shocked. I mean, what would you say? All wasted, right? What a terrible, awful waste. It's nearly $2 trillion a year. All wasted. The arms trade. I mean, ask yourself, which is worse, morally, which is worse? The arms trade or the slave trade? You think about it. I mean, you're abhorrent at the idea of slavery, but at least it was in the interest of the slaver to keep the slave alive, right? What's the use? What's the point? What's the function of a dead slave? Valueless. But what's the arms trade all about? It's about killing people. So the greatest offenders, making the arms and selling them. Have a guess who's the biggest offender in the world in terms of the arms trade? Our friend, the US. And second, Europe. Third, Russia. Right? And they each say, well, okay, we're disgusted, but the profits are multiple hundreds of billions of dollars a year. If we don't do it, then the other guy will do it. And they'll make all the profits, and they'll get the jobs. So therefore we sort of have to do it. So if you have a global state, no more arms trade. Right? So that goes. And then I see what are the major goals of a global parliament, a global state, would be education. See, I live in China, and I look at these poor peasants who've come from Western China, living on like $2 a day. And you just see they are brutalized. It's sort of hard to imagine if you haven't lived in it, but these people are so poor, they know nothing. There's even an expression in Chinese, he doesn't even know one character. That's sort of like not even knowing one letter in the alphabet. It's an expression. So these brutalized minds need to be pulled out of their ignorance. And we could do that because with Brad, the internet satellites can just beam down total education. From kindergarten to PhD seminars on all topics. The bandwidth will be there to be able to do it. Okay? So education will become critical, and then you can really push the message. Hey, you want to get out of poverty? You hate poverty? Okay, educate yourself. And here's the means. You can do it. So it'll be one of the major goals of the global state is to educate everybody. And pull them up out of poverty, and then we can all be rich. Now it all sounds all wonderful and optimistic and positive, but the last 2 minutes, okay. The last 2 minutes of the 10, 20 pages of the book, I get out my dagger and I stab the whole book in the back and twist the knife and saying, despite all this wonderful global optimism, I don't think it's going to be able to cope with the problem of the rise of the intellect. I just see that as too powerful. So these two trends going on at the same time, right? Accelerating technologies create immortality and nano robots in our bloodstream and massively intelligent machines. But one major branch I think has been overlooked is politics. Accelerating technologies will give us a global state. So maybe next year talk about this. Okay?
Yeah, we got a 3-hour slot here.
Yeah. So it's just my personal view. I just even Globa, that's the label I give this global state. Globa, obviously based on the word global, but ending in A, the letter A, because so many countries and continents end in the letter A, so it's sort of familiar. So even Globa, I don't think will be able to cope with this enormous, what's the word? Avalanche, I suppose, of the rise of massive artificial intelligence. I just think it's just too big. And if Globa comes first, and if there's a major war of this species dominance, then it would be a kind of global civil war. So I'll stop it. I always go to